Quick warning, the following content I'm going to discuss contains material or topics that might be either too sensitive for viewers or a bit too mature. So if you're not the age to watch this video or you're sensitive to topics such as essay, etc., I recommend you click off this video, watch some of my other videos instead. But if you wish to persist, I can't stop you, you know? You do you, but just please stay safe. Don't, do anything that will mess you up, please. I care about your mental health. Anyway, on with the video. If there's one factor that always must be considered when discussing LGBTQ themes, activism, and our lived experience, it's none other than the factor of intersectionality. LGBTQ identities are not simply their own set, nor do they exist in a vacuum, as LGBTQ people also exist at the intersection of other forms of discrimination in society. Notably, it can be between race and their sexuality, their disabilities and their gender, or even between the letters, such as being trans and gay, or intersex and ace, etc. However, one that we'll be looking at today is the intersection between being a woman and the LGBTQ community, more specifically how queer women, especially lesbians, experience the double-edged sword of sexism and homophobia at the same time. There's no surprise that queer women not only experience the blunt effects of sexism, but also experience homophobia. However, there's one thing that isn't really thought of, is that homophobia and sexism/misogyny benefits off of each other. Homophobia directly benefits from society's sexism because homophobia is a tool of sexism to not only reinforce the strict gender roles spun upon by society, but it also joins together to form heterosexism. Founder of the Arkansas Woman Project, Suzanne Farr, writes in her book, Homophobia, a Weapon of Sexism, homophobia works effectively as a weapon of sexism because it is joined with the powerful arm, heterosexism. Heterosexism creates the climate for homophobia with its assumption that the world is and must be heterosexual and its display of power and privilege as the norm. Heterosexism is the systematic display of homophobia in the institution of society. Heterosexism and homophobia work together to enforce compulsory heterosexuality and that bastion of patriarchal power, the nuclear family. To say that homophobia and sexism are not intertwined is foolish, because after all, the two systems of oppression have one goal in mind: to ensure that lesbians and other WLW women are fully conformed into the traditional society, with women expected to raise kids and be reduced to property of men, where no romance options are plentiful, no gender binary is broken, and women are simply to marry a woman and never dream of loving another woman. If one is to fight discrimination against the LGBTQ community, they must also remember that misogyny and the patriarchy is one that they must fight too, as there's no liberation without all of us. While it is one thing to acknowledge the misogyny and sexism of the world, it's also important to acknowledge that there's misogyny and sexism in our own LGBTQ community. Much like how there's racism, transphobia, intersexism, and ableism, misogyny and discrimination against women is almost unavoidable. I'm looking at you, some gay men. It's important to bring this up because at the end of the day, queer liberation cannot happen without liberation of all oppressed people across the world, including women. So, what does this video have to do with this intro today? Well, I want to recall back to my Yuri video and how I discussed the manga I Married My Best Friend So My Parents Shut Up, and how it not only shows the struggles of lesbian couples in Japan, it shows how women are pressured by their families to fulfill the heterosexist norms of marrying a guy and being expected to have a family. This manga stuck out with me, and because of that, I not only went back to reread the story to see how it also intertwines with women's identity in Japan, but also looked more into the mangaka of the series and the mangaka we're highlighting today, Naoko Kodama. Getting her career started in 2006 with Renai Paradise, Naoko Kodama is a mangaka who specializes in the genre of Yuri, and as of now, publishes in the monthly manga magazine Comic Yuri Hime. Aside from I Married My Best Friend, her other famous manga has to be NTR, Netsuzou Trap, which was adapted into an anime back in 2017, which, read the manga instead. Sorry, not my opinion, it's just true. Aside from this, Kodama has had plenty of Yuri works that not only show beautiful, in lighter terms to get to that, relationships, but also shows the experiences of young women in Japan and how they navigate times such as high school, relationships, and marriage. Cocytus, Fujiyuu Sekai, Sanko Noise, Cocytus again, and Seagull Villa Days all show themes of open lesbianism, sexuality, healthy and unhealthy relationships, and the experience young women live through in Japan. Naoko Kodama captures the struggles and intersections indirectly faced by queer women through her stories. Not only that, Kodama also displays a unique experience to lesbians and other queer women to her stories, which not only illustrate the struggles of lesbians and WLW, but also illustrates their unique love that can't truly be captured in heterosexual or more male-dominated stories. One thing that immediately makes Kodama's work stand out in contrast to a lot of Yuri is that it does not shy away from using the word lesbian or showing lesbian identities. Usually with Yuri, they don't really use labels. However, Kodama specifically goes out of the way to use the word lesbian multiple times in her story to describe her characters. This not only has a real strong connection to lesbians reading it, but also brings a more realistic aspect to the Yuri in an already slice-of-life story. Why is this use of terminology important as well? It's because Kodama's work already gives a nice immersive feel thanks to her characters being the age of her target audience, but now incorporating such an important term really brings queer readers in. It's not hiding anything. Of course, this also comes with lesbophobia. One moment I want to bring up is the locker scene in Cocytus, where you can clearly see a derogatory term written on Kuroneko's locker. Kodama is not only capturing lesbophobia and showing the realistic consequences that happen in society, but it also shows how a hierarchy of women play in the school. In Cocytus, the bully girl, Yoshida, has a set of strict hierarchy of what women should be like, practically fitting into the society's norms of a popular and a desirable girl. This not only shows how women are forced to behave in a certain way to be seen as desirable and or valuable, but how this hierarchy also punches down on lesbians. Despite being short at 2 chapters, specifically Shina and Kuroneko's arc, Cocytus really does good not shying away from being open with the girl's queerness. Another example is Lying Brides in Same-Sex Theory, which we'll properly introduce later, which shows Shigasawa-san being an open lesbian and contemplating her identity as she sees people get married and same-sex marriage almost being legalized in her world in Japan. It shows that Kodama's work isn't a simple A to Z romance, but rather a WLW's identity is being put into focus to build a more immersive and deeper Yuri story, not only for women to draw parallels to the struggles they face in life, but also to hopefully appeal to lesbians who also experience both homophobia, sexism, and the demands of society that women should do in order to feel desired. Kodama knows this. Kodama is purposely doing this. She even mentions this in a 2017 interview she had alongside Citrus's creator Saburota, where she states, "I guess because we are also girls and can imagine a real sense of both feelings, like having that annoying part of yourself inside you. Little by little, we can add many different elements to create our own character. If we draw men, no matter what we would have to guess to draw. If we draw BL, we'd have to take a guess at both feelings," showing that Kodama as a woman is in control of her characters and also does well in relating and correlating it to queer women's struggles, especially lesbians. Also, really fun fact in this interview, she mentions she sees Yuri everywhere and points to Kyoko and Sayaka's relationship from Madoka Magica. So if someone tries to come at you and say that Madoka Magica isn't a Yuri, tell them they're wrong, because Kodama said so, because Yuri Jesus Madoka helped produce Sayaka and Kyoko, and there's also Homura and Madoka, which is the definition of toxic Yuri. Oh yeah, speaking of toxic Yuri, if there's one thing that every Yuri fan, or at least a Naoko Kodama reader knows, is that Kodama herself is practically the queen of toxic Yuri. Kodama's stories are usually full of one-sided crushes, manipulation, essay, and a lot of messy relationships. As Kodama isn't afraid to flash the viewers with her character's naked body and or put in a sex scene, Kodama is very open with sex as a theme in her stories. Now, it is easy to brush it off as simple sex scenes because it's a couple and couples do that. However, I feel in the context of the scenes in Kodama, I feel like it's instead of just having a sex scene for a scene, Kodama's sexual content tells a story and gives us insight into a character's behavior. The best example of this is in Fujiyuu Sekai, Chapter 4. After Reo does not respond to Meiko, Meiko confronts her slave about Reo wanting to be more independent and wanting to do stuff outside of Meiko, and Meiko says these words, "You want to look into my eyes? Want to feel what it's like to be..." At first glance, this scene might come off as horrible, and that the toxicity of this is beyond toxic, it's insane. However, after rereading the 6 chapters and looking back into it, it's a lot more deeper. It's still disturbing, but instead of it being shocking or just used for shock factor, it's depressing in a horrible way. Meiko herself is an SA victim. The reason this story happened is not only because Reo feels guilty about not walking home that day, leading her to be sexually assaulted. Since then, Reo, burdened by guilt, decided to be her slave, following whatever Meiko says and does. However, when you read it, you start to realize that while Meiko's actions are toxic and hurts Reo, Meiko is a girl who was seen as weak, bullied by other women and accused of checking out others' boyfriends, and Reo was the one who defended her. Reo was her guardian angel, her savior, and her girlfriend or slave. Meiko is a victim who has no idea not only how to cope with her trauma of abuse, but also has no way to actually understand sexual want outside of the violence she experienced. Meiko herself is unable to move on and is currently in a state of pause because of how traumatic that experience was, which unfortunately bleeds to assault Reo as well. In fact, after this scene, Meiko is seen crying in the bathroom, feeling ashamed of the horrible crime she committed against Reo. This scene isn't to give Meiko sympathy points or justify her actions, but rather, it shows how her trauma has not only damaged her, and also led to an attack on the girl she loves so much, but is unable to truly show her apology or remorse in a meaningful way because of the trauma. Kodama uses Fujiyuu Sekai to not only show the lingering trauma SA has on women and how it affects their personal lives, but also how it affects queer women in same-sex relations. It shows how some lesbians and WLW also carry that trauma into relationships with women, one that should be free of consequences from heterosexism, but alas, they're not, and both of them have to suffer it. Speaking of relations, one other factor that Kodama brings up in her manga is the concept of marriage. I mean, the manga I talked about was I Married My Best Friend, right? And that manga talked about not only the views of a lesbian struggling to gain acceptance for her relationship, but also struggling with the idea of marriage being a given in society. Same-sex marriage is awesome. I love it. I definitely want to get married. However, just because gay couples have same-sex marriage does not mean marriage as an institution is without fault, nor were said faults done away with when they expanded to other factors such as interracial marriage and same-sex marriages. Marriage, in history, has always been seen as a sexist idea, a way that has women submit and become property of the men. Stephanie Kuntz, a historian that analyzes the history of family and marriages, acknowledges that marriage was a misogynistic practice in society, as her book, Marriage, A History, explains. The main means of transferring property, occupational status, personal contracts, money, tools, livestock, and women across generations and kin groups, showing that women are pretty much seen as property to be given to men in marriage. Kodama captures the problem with marriages in her most recent manga publishing as of now, Lying Brides and the Same-Sex Marriage Theory. The manga revolves around Shigesawa-san and Goto-san as they ask themselves the question regarding the importance of marriage. In fact, the manga announcement was teased with the phrase, "Is marriage really the happiness for women?" Shigesawa-san is a lesbian who is not only watching same-sex marriage acceptance increase in society, but also gets fed up with office life and how she is inconvenienced by her co-workers' leaves. When she reunites with Goto-san, her longtime friend and her crush, she learns that she is married, but it's not as rosy red as it seems. Chapter 2 really solidifies the way Kodama captures lesbian experiences while also highlighting women's struggles. In Chapter 2, Shigesawa is complaining how her hard work is not from her own merits, but she is taken advantage of because she is not married. We also get a passage of her saying that she too wants marriage, but will never experience such because of her identity as a lesbian. Goto, however, praises her, and even states that her hard work made her realize that women actually could succeed, and that she was told women couldn't succeed, but that was a lie. In the same chapter, Goto, a married woman, starts to realize the charm of marriage fading away. She states that she always had the thought that she'd be married and have kids, as after all, that's what she was raised to believe. She had that thought because it was ingrained into her mind. This chapter shows their contrasting values and how it not only is important to their development, but how it plays out in their future romance. Chapter 4 emphasizes this, as we not only see Goto-san interact with her husband, but also shows how it contrasts to her relationship with Shigesawa-san. Whereas her husband is demanding of her obedience, Shigesawa-san wants to care for Goto-san as a partner. The contrast shows the differentiating views between effects on marriages on women, especially for WLW, whereas Shigesawa is a woman who dreams of marrying another woman, taking her as her own partner. Goto sees the realism of marriage and how it holds her back. This shows that in society, marriage is a good thing with flaws, and instead of seeing it as a simple end goal or a thing to abolish, it's something that must be reworked so it's removed from its misogynist roots, so that way it can be enjoyed by women, and one way by doing that it's allowing for same-sex marriage to happen. Lying Brides Brides is still being published in Comic Yuri Hime as we speak. So as of now, the story is still going, but I'm definitely excited. But wait, Goto-san marries a man. Normalize hating men who get in the way of Yuri. Oh, speaking of men, Naoko Kodama has a lot of recurring themes in her work, be it the brunette falls in love with the blonde girl, struggling with the ideas of being attracted to women, and also trauma and sexism from men. She also has points where she shows the negative influence men has had on queer women in their stories. For example, when discussing NTR, we see how Hotaru is the sneaky girl, always tricking and messing with her lover Yuma. But I barely see anyone talk about Fujiwara, and let me say, Fujiwara is a bad, horrible person, bad, ugly, disgusting man. I hope he dies. When we say normalizing hating on men that get between Yuri, yeah, this is him. Hate on him, it's your moral duty. One important plot point is that Hotaru and Yuma are cheating on their partners, and Hotaru being Fujiwara, whereas Takada, Yuma's partner, is sweet and loving and even liked by the mangaka. Fujiwara is a sexist manipulator. He has taken photos of both Hotaru and Yuma being intimate in their privacy, shared them, and brags about hating women and getting mad when they aren't being submissive and pleasuring him. So is this whole segment about hating Fujiwara? Yes, it is your moral duty to hate this man, but it also brings up another point. Through Fujiwara's existence, Kodama not only highlights the heterosexism lesbians and queer women still face from men despite being in a WLW relationship, it shows that men can still be complicit in misogyny even when they're dating women or loving women. Not only is Fujiwara being misogynist towards them, he hides it behind him dating girls and Hotaru being his girlfriend. Dating girls and I have a girlfriend does not exempt you from sexist behavior, so if you're like that, please check yourself. Not to mention, it also highlights how both react to such, and how Hotaru and Yuma navigate their sexuality, their roles in society, and their relationship, especially with how they are in other relationships. NTR is really toxic, Yuri, yes it is. No, trust me, Hotaru can be just as crazy. Believe me, it gets crazy, okay? She's not all that innocent. But it's worth a read if you get a chance. Not the anime though, the anime is kind of mid. The last manga from Kodama that I want to highlight regarding the theme of men and their trauma on WLW is my personal favorite manga of Kodama's, Days of Love at Seagull Villa. Immediately off the bat, it's hit with this theme and the theme of brunette and blonde fall in love. The story revolves around Mayumi moving to Seagull Villa Inn after being left for dead by her fiancé who cheated on her and got another woman pregnant. Here, she meets her lover Rin, who has been raising her baby sister Hinata ever since their parents got into a car accident, and grow a romance. I love this story, as it not only is on the wholesome side, thank you for sparing them toxic Yuri, Jesus, but also we see Rin and Mayumi bond about their trauma, be it Rin's family passing and being left to care for Hinata alone, but also Mayumi reminiscing over her loss of a fiancé. Throughout the story, Mayumi is not seen as good enough and constantly lingers in the shadow of such portrayal. This is also personified when Toko, the one who's marrying her ex, stops by to visit. After stating she had a miscarriage, Toko visits Mayumi and tries to get her to return to the city and also manipulates her in the first place. You see, the reason Mayuri is so hurt from this is because Toko betrayed her, becoming her fiancé's girlfriend and taking him away from her. What this shows is that the boyfriend was never loyal in the first place. And second, Toko rubs that in. She knows that she's the one that was picked by the man. She knows that she's the one that's valuable. And because of this, she wants to torment and harass Mayuri with it. And it's cruelty, because the reason she's benefiting and doing this is because she got the approval of a man. Although you can put the blame on Toko, the fiancé is still in the wrong because he was the one who went away from Mayuri and went away with another woman, which he shouldn't have done in the first place, especially for something as already heavy as marriage, which we talked about with Lying Brides. I love how Kodama shows Mayuri not only slowly coming to terms to liking Rin, but also overcome the trauma that she has from the past relationship and to move on from her ex. Another example from Seagull Villa is the character of Ashima. When introduced to Ashima, we learn she is the child of an affair and considered an illegitimate child. Because of this, she's discriminated against and bullied by such. What Ashima shows, aside from also being sapphic, is that it shows how women are seen as properties or responsibilities of bad sexual choices, especially young women. She's seen as a mistake because of her parents' actions, and thus forced to deal with the backlash. Seagull Villa is more than this, of course, as we see Mayuri come to her own and Ashima improves her grades, but I do love how the theme of breaking out of the patriarchal society is not only shown as Ashima makes a name for herself out of the forced notions, and Mayuri liberating herself from such trauma, but also seeing Mayuri and Rin become a couple, not for the sake of a family and to fulfill a woman's role, but in their own queer sapphic way that WLW can relate to, with even such such a cute little daughter. Aw. With Hinata as well. We love her. Look at her. Little baby. After going through all of Kodama's work, it's easy to not only see the struggle of young lesbians in a more heteronormative Japanese society, but also how WLW women end up dealing with both heterosexual norms and the idea of the patriarchy weighing down on them, whether it's simple stuff such as weddings and behaviors, to even deeper topics such as the trauma from SA. A WLW's experience is drastically different. However, it's important to share. In a world that's already homophobic and transphobic, there's no doubt that misogyny is still a problem in this day, whether it's Japan's misogynist laws such as the surname laws, abortion rights, to even more extreme cases in the world such as Afghanistan, Latin America's femicide, and Iran's morality police and the death of Masha Amini. Well, what does LGBTQ have to do with this? Why is this our business? More importantly, why also talk about Kodama's work? Simple. Queerphobia and sexism are a package deal. If a society already demonizes women, what's stopping them from attacking us? People like Shigesawa will not only have to worry about being able to marry, but also the sexism among her co-workers. People like Meiko will not only have difficulty navigating her identity as a lesbian, but also the trauma from SA that's so normalized in a society that pretty much just tells her it's natural. Or people like Hotaru, who have to experience an abusive relationship in a misogynist man. This is why Yuri, like Kodama's, are so powerful, as it not only shows a more nuanced perspective of queer women affected by heterosexism, but also can be seen as a call for those to realize that one's fight is also another, for queer women to always be aware of the society and how to stay safe, and for straight women, maybe to be more aware of their lesbian and WLW sisters. As for Hime Danshis and men reading it, simple. Listen, read about queer women and their experiences. Heck, even read Yuri, because as Kodama demonstrated, Yuri can also capture women's experience and their own oppression as women themselves. As a gay man, I want to encourage almost every other queer man to read Yuri. The reason? It gives us a perspective of our sisters, our queer sisters in arms. It gives us a perspective on loving women that we don't usually understand. Not only that, it can also show solidarity with queer women who read yaoi, because hey, shout out to our fujoshis. And it's important to not only acknowledge our own struggles, but find intersectionality and understanding between two marginalized groups. After all, the fight for women is also a fight for LGBTQ. Thank you so much for watching. I'm really glad I got a video out. Sorry for the lack of videos. I'm currently doing something IRL. So anyway, thank you so much. This one's for the lesbians, for all the queer women out there. Just shouting you guys out because I love Kodama's work. Please read Kodama's work. Please keep up with same-sex theory. I think it's really cool. Lying brides and same-sex theory. Sorry, I'm really tired. Make sure to follow me on Tumblr, on Instagram. Join my Discord because we do a lot of stuff. We're watching a lot of Boom Boomjer because we're trying to watch that for one of the premieres, or it happened. I don't know when this video gets out. Thank you so much, and make sure to like, comment, and subscribe, and share. And thank you so much for 10K, of course. I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much.